Hello and welcome to week 7 and a little bit of update as to what's been going on in my life. I just got back from New Hampshire, a little vacation that we had down there. And 2 days ago, my wife was goofing off and fell and broke her leg in 3 places. And she is currently in a lot of pain, and we are awaiting our consult on a surgical intervention on that. So that's been a little distracting. Back on the rails. That doesn't dissuade me from still participating in class here, but just so you understand a little bit of the delay. At least there's a reason for the delay this time as opposed to my just goofing off myself. So here we are in week 7 taking on chapter 7. I guess probably one of my favorite chapters because it really is the area of my personal, or at least one of the areas of my personal research focus. And that is what's something that's really important about chapter 7, the emerging and early adulthood phases, is we really start to see the transition between inherited traits that are manifesting in ourselves and the influence of our environment into the construction of our personalities and our identity, where we as adults, legally and otherwise, start to take on the role of making purposeful decisions to create who we are. Now, there are still lots of theories that talk about predispositions and things like personality traits and whatnot, physical attributes that hold certain influence in the way society interacts with you. Race certainly being one, but height is another one, age is another one. All of these things, aspects of our physical genetic presentation that have an effect on what the world is going to respond in terms of reinforcing or punishing, or not reinforcing at least, certain behavioral traits. Gender, of course, too, throwing that in there. So we still have that stuff going on. So in the first discussion, we're really looking at tying between the first indicators that we had of psychological personality that we recognized in the theory of temperament. And then now we're looking at a test that can be utilized to measure personality, not only the inherited, natural, genetic influenced qualities, but also the choices that we make in terms of what we do to create ourselves. And that is a trait theory by the name of the Big Five. Now, it's called the Big Five because there are lots of trait theories. There's 16 in the 16 PF. There's 27 here and there. There's the typologies like Myers-Briggs and, all of these things. A meta-analysis was done several years ago, and they broke it down to what, in all of those theories, what are the 5 most common ones? And they came up with those 5. So they call them the Big Five, as 5 core aspects of our personality. They're certainly not encompassing of our entire personality, but they're important qualities, important enough that they appear over and over and over in other tests. So we're going to be looking at the Big Five personality assessment. I'm having you take that test, and I'm having you do an analysis on how it relates to stories of your youth when you were being measured and understood through your temperament. Have you always been the same sort of person? Making that connection, discussing that among each other, and talking to your subject, talking to other family members. Get this as a conversation, not only taking the Big Five, but also that discussion about how we change from that, or don't change from that original temperament base that we started off with. Discussion B, I ask you an open dialogue on my current theory of puzzle pieces. Puzzle pieces is a constructivist theory of identity development that I've been working on for several years. There's some important junctions coming up in terms of writing a book, putting together a training component that I'm going to be working on into the fall. And these are things that are starting to see fruit. And I'm always interested. I place this in here almost like tell me what you think about this theory. Tell me what you think about the way I lay out the influences, but then also the choices that we make in terms of our identity development. And really introduces to, again, looking at the personality theory of James Marcia, which is a core component of that particular theory, and goes all over the place in there. So then after that, there's a quiz, and what I introduced, another test, the Holland test, which matches personality traits with environments in which those personality traits will manifest. Now, the Holland test is often used in career decision making. What will be the best environment that I'm going to be in? I want to contextualize this. Let's say you want to be a nurse. In the nursing job and in different environments in which nurses operate, all of these environments are represented. The thing to really understand is not that, let's say you are very high and artistic. It's not that you would quit wanting to be a nurse and go be a sculptor. That's not the purpose of this. The idea is you still want to be a nurse, but you may find the creative elements of being a nurse to be the most satisfying. So when you're shopping for work as a nurse, you might look for places that involve creative problem solving. Maybe you might get into, maybe if there's, the teacher component there, you might get into training and you really enjoy making handouts and posters and stuff, informative posters. Maybe that becomes like your part of your gig as a nurse. And you find those things really satisfying to the point that you can put up with the things that are not so satisfying. Maybe you're not really into the analytical component of measuring everything and documenting. You're doing it because it's part of your job, but it's not your favorite part because I'm really artistic. So I really like the artistic components of that job. So as much as you can look at this in this quiz, you can look at this as a way of determining, am I in the right general career area and doing some introspection about that. But it's also, well, what aspects of my chosen career, or maybe even my chosen careers, you can then look back and say, wow, I was always doing the creative stuff. Wherever I went, I looked for creative outlets because my creativity desire is really high. So that's how you use the contextual aspect of the Holland test. Then I want you to take a look at your own cultural dimensions of childbirth assignment. This was a creative assignment that I believe reflects your Holland test. So I want you to look at what your Holland test in terms of your highest scores, and then compare it to how you did, not your grade, how you did on the actual, how you actually put it together. And I think you're going to, and look for the connection between those. The Holland test talks about your career preferences and work preferences, and then you're looking at a product of work to see if you can see that personality reflected there. And finally, it's a big week because it's an important chapter. We're looking at adulting. What does it mean to be an adult? And every one of us has our own unique perspective. This is a wonderful task to do in a face-to-face classroom. We have people exchanging ideas about this. I'm essentially asking you to create a job description for what it means to be an adult. Not an adult job and its description. I don't want that. What I want is you're putting an ad out there. You want to hire a person who's an adult. So what does that mean? What does that mean to you to be an adult? And I want you to list at least 10, I think I put at least 10 characteristics. I'll give you one. They pay their own bills. That's what adults do, right? So, and then you're going to create a survey. So, you have each one of those traits, and you have what's called a Likert scale. You've come across them before. That's, 1, hardly ever, 5, almost all the time, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the kind of rating scale, but how much of that trait exists. And then I want you to take the test yourself and give yourself a score on how well you did being an adult in the last 30 days. Now that might mean if you're living at home and one of the characteristics that you have in terms of being an adult is owning a house, then you had, hardly ever or 0. You had the lowest score possible on that one. And so that's how I want you to evaluate. Those things are it's the social clock is really what that is. It's the social clock. What does it mean to be an adult? Are you there? And if not, isn't it your goal to do that? Like, say you're living at home, isn't it your goal to move out on your own? If you don't have a job yet, isn't it your goal to have a job? Those kinds of things that actually draw us toward adulthood. Or the things we fight because we don't want to be an adult yet. I haven't moved out because I'm scared of what's out there. I don't quite want to be 100% adult yet. So kind of a fun activity to engage in that notion of what is adulthood. And this is another one. If you want to replicate what I do in the classroom, is I have 2 people paired up. They do their descriptions, and then they act as adult supervisors, and they evaluate each other as to how well they did using their own test. So I'm going to use my standards to evaluate you. You're going to use your standards to evaluate me. They may not be 100% aligned. And so, in fact, they probably won't be 100% aligned. So you and your spouse, or you and your partner, or you and your children, or whatever, you can actually, I do my test, and then let's see how we did on each other's test and have a discussion about that process of transitioning to adulthood. This is not a judgmental thing. If you're not an adult yet, and you're 25, there are social norms associated with that. And, we have movies about failure to launch. We also have lots of stories about people who adulted very early, early adulters who took on responsibilities fairly early in life. So we have all those dimensions. Ultimately, your path is your own, and it's perfectly fine. But it's a neat way to see how those social factors and expectations impact our sense of self in terms of how we see ourselves as adults. So that's the big week 7. It's always been, chapter 7 has always been a lot going on. And so in the summer, we're stuck with just doing it over 1 week when it really should be kind of a 2-week process to do this. But here we go. So enjoy chapter 7. I look forward to the discussions. In particular, I'm always looking at feedback on the puzzle pieces theory, and as I'm tying up the knots to actually go public with that notion. So I will see you in class. Have a great week and take care.